The night before a Viking battle, a warrior did not sleep, not because he was afraid, because there was too much to do. His weapons needed to be checked, his shield needed to be inspected, his armor needed to be on, his gods needed to be spoken to, his mind needed to be in the right place. And all of this had to happen before the sun came up and the fighting began. Most people think of Viking warriors as men who picked up an axe and ran screaming at the enemy. The reality is completely different. Viking battle preparation was a system. It was ritual, it was psychology, it was engineering, and it started long before any enemy was in sight. Before we go further, one question for the comments. If you had to choose one Viking weapon to carry into battle, which one would it be? Leave your answer below. We will come back to this. This is how Vikings prepared for battle. The preparation began not on the morning of the fight, but months or even years before it. A Viking warrior's readiness was not something he built in the days before a raid. It was something he maintained continuously, the way a farmer maintains his land, or a blacksmith maintains his tools. Physical conditioning was constant. Viking society was already physically demanding in ordinary life. Farming, fishing, rowing, felling timber, the everyday work of a Viking settlement built strength and endurance as a byproduct. But warriors went beyond this. Wrestling was practiced regularly in Viking society. Competitions in lifting heavy stones were common. Swimming was considered an essential skill, not just for survival at sea, but because a warrior who could not swim was a liability in the waterborne warfare Vikings conducted along coastlines and rivers. Weapon training began in childhood. Boys were given wooden practice weapons and taught basic movements long before they were old enough to carry real ones. The axe, the spear, the knife, the shield, each required a different set of techniques and a different kind of conditioning. Learning to use a weapon effectively took years. A man who picked up an axe for the first time on the morning of a battle was already dead. The spear was the most common Viking weapon by a significant margin. Not the axe, the spear. Archaeological evidence from Viking burial sites shows spears appearing far more frequently than axes or swords. A spear could be thrown from a distance, used to thrust at close range, or planted in the ground as a barrier. It was cheaper to produce than a sword and more versatile than an axe. Every Viking warrior knew how to use one. The sword was different. A sword was expensive. It required a skilled blacksmith, high-quality iron, significant time, and considerable technical knowledge to produce. Many Viking warriors never owned one. The men who carried swords were usually those wealthy enough to commission one, or lucky enough to capture one from an enemy. A Viking sword was not just a weapon. It was an heirloom. It was inheritance. It was proof of status. Men gave their swords names. They passed them to their sons. Finding a Viking sword buried with a warrior tells you immediately that this man occupied a position of considerable importance. Shields were the primary defensive equipment of every Viking warrior. Round, typically between 80 and 100 centimeters in diameter, made of wooden planks, usually lime, fir, or alder, with a circular iron boss at the center that protected the hand grip behind it. The planks were not thick. A Viking shield was designed not to absorb blows, but to deflect them. You did not hold your shield and let an axe hit it. You angled it, redirected the strike, used the boss to punch back. Knowing how to use a shield properly was as important as knowing how to use a weapon. The shield's wooden planks were sometimes covered in leather to prevent them from splitting. The rim was reinforced with rawhide or iron. On the longships, shields were displayed along the sides. This was partly practical, keeping them ready for use and out of the way on the rowing benches, and partly psychological, telling anyone who saw the ship approaching exactly what was on board. Armor was not universal. The popular image of Viking warriors in full chainmail is largely wrong. Chainmail, called a brynja, existed and was used by wealthier warriors, but it was expensive, heavy, and required a skilled craftsman to produce. The average Viking warrior wore a thick padded garment called a gambeson, layers of quilted cloth or leather that provided meaningful protection against cuts and some protection against blunt force. Helmets were similarly rare and similarly status-dependent. Most Viking helmets were simple iron or leather caps, not the elaborate horned helmets of popular imagination. The horned helmet, for the record, did not exist in the Viking Age. It was an invention of 19th-century romantics. Real Viking helmets were practical, undecorated, and designed to protect the head from direct strikes. The Geirmundbu helmet, found in Norway in 1943, is the only complete Viking Age helmet ever discovered. It is a simple rounded iron cap with a nose guard. No horns, No decorations, just iron, designed to keep its owner alive. In the days before a planned raid or battle, the preparation became more focused and more intense. Weapons were sharpened. An axe or sword that was not razor sharp was not a functional weapon. Viking warriors carried whetstones, small, portable sharpening stones, as standard equipment. Archaeological finds frequently include whetstones alongside weapons and tools in Viking graves. A blunt edge required more force to cut, was more likely to glance off armor or bone, and exhausted the wielder faster. Before a battle, every edge was honed until it was right. Shields were inspected and repaired. A shield with a cracked plank or a loose boss was a liability. The repaired shield had to be checked, tightened, relaced. If a shield was too damaged to fix, it needed to be replaced. Meals were eaten deliberately. Heavy, high-calorie food before battle. Viking warriors knew, as all soldiers have always known, that fighting on an empty stomach was a mistake, and that fighting on a too full stomach was equally dangerous. The balance was important. Enough food to maintain strength and endurance for hours of physical combat, not so much that movement was impaired. Then there was the psychological preparation. And this is where Viking battle preparation becomes unlike almost anything else in the ancient world. The Norse belief system was not a passive religion. It demanded participation. Before battle, a warrior was expected to seek the favor of the gods directly. Odin was the god of war and of warriors who died in battle, but he was not simply invoked for victory. Odin was the god of the chosen dead, the Einherjar. Warriors selected to join him in Valhalla after falling in combat. Praying to Odin before a battle was not asking to win. It was asking to be worthy of dying well, so that if you fell, you would be taken. This reframing of death is crucial to understanding Viking psychology in combat. A warrior who had made his peace with dying, who genuinely believed that a glorious death in battle was not a disaster, but an honor, was a fundamentally different kind of fighter from one who was fighting purely to survive. Fear of death was not eliminated by this belief system, but it was repositioned. Death was not the worst outcome. Cowardice, flight, dying badly. Those were the worst outcomes. Sacrifices were made before major engagements. Animals were killed and their blood used in rituals to dedicate the coming battle to the gods. In larger raids and wars, the preparations could include elaborate ceremonies. A feast might be held. The last night's feast before battle is one of the recurring themes of the sagas. Warriors would eat and drink together, and in that shared ritual was a kind of collective psychological preparation. You were not going into battle alone. You were going in with the men who had sat beside you at that table. The berserkers deserve specific attention here. The word berserk, which we still use today, comes directly from the Old Norse berserker. The berserkers were a specific class of Viking warrior who fought in a state of wild, uncontrolled fury. Ancient sources describe them as men who bit their shields before battle, who howled like animals, who seemed to feel no pain, who fought with a ferocity that made them terrifying even to their own side. The exact mechanism of the berserker state is still debated. Some historians believe it was psychological, a cultivated state of battle rage that could be induced through ritual, preparation, and deliberate mental conditioning. Some suggest the use of substances. Alcohol was common before battle in many ancient cultures, and certain plants with psychoactive properties were available in Scandinavia. Some accounts mention the consumption of fly agaric mushrooms, though this connection is contested in modern scholarship. What is not contested is the tactical effect. A man who appears to feel no pain, who advances without hesitation, who fights with explosive, unpredictable violence, is extraordinarily difficult to face. Modern understanding of combat psychology supports the ancient accounts. Extreme adrenaline states can genuinely suppress the perception of pain. The berserker state was, in some sense, a real phenomenon, even if its religious interpretation was not literal. Not all Vikings fought as berserkers. Most fought in disciplined formations. The Skjaldborg, the shield wall, was the primary tactical formation of Viking land warfare. Warriors stood shoulder to shoulder with their shields overlapping, creating an interlocking wall of wood and iron that was extremely difficult to break through from the front. The front rank would engage the enemy with short thrusting weapons and shield-to-shield pushing. Warriors in the ranks behind used longer spears to reach over the first rank and strike at the enemy. The formation required discipline, coordination, and trust in the men on either side of you. To train effectively for the shield wall, you needed to practice with the same group of men repeatedly. You needed to know how they moved, how they held their shields, when they would step, and when they would hold. This is another reason why Viking warrior preparation was not a matter of days, but of years. The unit cohesion required by the shield wall was built through shared training, shared rating, shared hardship. Men who had rowed together, camped together, and survived danger together were the men you wanted beside you in the shield wall. Before a large battle, the warriors would form up and beat their weapons against their shields. This noise had multiple purposes. It was intimidating to the enemy. It released tension in the warriors themselves. It was a signal. The sound of shields being beaten together was a cue that the formation was ready and the advance was about to begin. Modern research into pre-combat rituals in multiple warrior cultures confirms that physical, rhythmic group activity before combat genuinely reduces individual anxiety and increases group cohesion. The Vikings understood this without needing the science. They had arrived at the same answer through centuries of experience. The night before a battle on a raid, the longships were pulled as close to shore as possible. Warriors slept aboard or nearby in small groups, keeping their weapons within reach. Sentries were posted. Fire was kept to a minimum to avoid giving away the position. If they had the advantage of surprise, they would maintain it until the last possible moment. The attack was planned to begin at dawn. Enough light to see, not enough for the defenders to have organized. When the moment came, the approach to shore was made in silence. Oars were muffled. Men crouched low. The ships beached as close as possible, and the warriors sprang out into the shallows and ran for dry land. The first men off the ships often carried the shields of the men behind them, allowing the following warriors to disembark faster. Speed from ship to shore was critical. A warrior standing in knee-deep water with an enemy on the bank above him was at a severe disadvantage. Once on land, the formation was immediate. No milling about, no individual heroics until the shield wall was established. Discipline in those first moments on the beach often determined whether a raid succeeded or ended in disaster. All of this, the weapons maintenance, the physical training, the shield practice, the ritual preparation, the unit cohesion, the tactical discipline, was the reality behind the image of the howling Viking warrior. The howling was real. But it came after years of preparation that most people never picture when they imagine a Viking going into battle. Back to the question from the beginning. One Viking weapon to carry into battle. Which one? The spear is the practical answer, the most common, the most versatile, the weapon that most Viking warriors actually relied on. The sword is the prestigious answer. The axe is the answer that everyone gives, and fewer people could actually use effectively. The experienced answer, if you know what you are doing, is the shield. Because a weapon without a shield is how you die quickly. A shield used well keeps you alive long enough to use whatever weapon is in your other hand. Leave your answer in the comments. If this changed how you see Viking warriors, that is exactly what this channel is for. Subscribe. Every video is history that most people never heard told right. The world has not changed. The battles have. You're welcome.